Chill. Going on, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the PRC-IAPN Roundtable. Tonight is part 2 of the non-pagan view of paganism with Roderick Edwards. So, first of all, if everybody would like to go around the table and introduce themselves real quick.
I am Earl Williams. I'm the owner and host of Iowa Pagan News on the Prairie Land Radio Network.
I'm Reverend Shadow Wolf. I'm the West Coast Director of Operations for the Pagan Rights Coalition.
Give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, we'll go with Christy. Come back to Diaz.
Hey, everybody. I'm Christy Mann. I'm the owner and chief editor at Metaphysical Times newspaper.
Mr. Diaz.
Yeah, here you go. What's going on, gentlemen?
Introduction.
It's Mel Diaz. Third generation gray male witch. I run 4 groups on Facebook. We are witch. We are young witches. My craft, and we are witch Latino. How y'all doing from Boston? Chill.
And I'm Roderick Edwards, the non-pagan part of this collaboration here, and I'm author of 20 or more books, and so this is kind of the interest. We're trying to understand each other here, and that's why we're here today.
Nice.
And I'm Reverend Scott. I'm the head of the Pagans Rights Coalition, United Pagan Charities Cooperative, as well as I am the managing editor of the Full Moon at the Metaphysical Times.
Excellent. So last time we defined what paganism is, and just a brief summary of it. We said it was agrarian. It was the common religious practices of people who are not part of, for example, we said Rome. Rome had its temples and all these things, but outside of Rome were the common people, and they didn't participate in all the temple worship. I think that's roughly what we said. And then we discussed a little bit about the unity among pagan community and various books. Do they have sacred books? We said they have many, but not one specific, like a Bible or a Quran. And then last week we talked a little bit about the morality, or we call it the rule of 3, where I think Ed mentioned it's where whatever you do comes back to you physically, spiritually, and emotionally. So we discussed that as well. But tonight we would hopefully discuss what's called culture. People call it cultural appropriation. In this case, are pagans, when they use pantheons from Druids and Vikings, are they really appropriating their culture? And then second, we're going to talk about the morality among pagans. We talked about that a little bit, but I want to get more into that tonight. So with the first question, if we're ready to go, I'll just set this up. Cultural appropriation, it's a term we hear now. It's kind of like a politically correct word, but you hear it, to frame it this way. For example, sometimes Black people will say, if you wear dreadlocks, you're appropriating Black culture. Whether you are or not, that's what they say. Or if you wear Native American headdresses or feathers in your hair and you're not Native American, you're appropriating their culture. So my question to the panel tonight is, are pagans in a way appropriating the cultures of other religions, dead religions for that matter, Druids and Vikings and other things, when they use bits and pieces of their religions? For example, before you answer the question, if I was a Druid or a Viking and I came back from the past today and I seen you using bits and pieces of my religion, would I see a familiarity of my own religion in what you're doing with it? Or would I say you've basically blasphemed it and changed it to something I don't even want it to be? So who wants to stab at that one first?
I'll start this one off.
All right, Earl.
Okay. Okay. Now, getting to the second part of that, I do believe that, say, for instance, if a Celtic Viking were to come back to come forward into this time period, they would see a familiarity of their religion, and at least with most of our Viking or Celtic Vikings and Norsemen in this day and age, they still respect and honor the gods from the past. So yeah, there would be a similarity. And going to the first part, basically Druids, Vikings, and say like Native American, Asatru, it all basically they all fall under the umbrella of paganism.
But why? Can I ask that? We'll dig a little bit further. Why do we get called all those pagans? I mean, sort of like I get upset when I hear some things called myths and some called religion. Who gets to decide what's a myth and what's a religion? We won't get that too far on that. But why can you lump three different, very distinct to me, distinct religions or cultures into one pagan concept?
Well,
You're right. But
yeah, a lot of them will follow a earth-centered spirituality, which falls under the umbrella of paganism.
Okay, makes sense.
And as far as myths go, they say that dragons are myths, vampires are myths. There's all these things that are called myths, but every myth that you hear about has some truth basing behind it.
Even the Christian God is a myth.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get down to it, I mean, what we call myths and legends, do we know for a simple fact that these are actual beings? Do we know for a fact that these are actual whatever? Christians call their belief in God and whatever faith. So it's the faith that carries us through with whatever people call a myth and what we believe in. Do I think that there's a cultural appropriation depending on what we practice? I wouldn't say so, and the reason why is because there's a certain way that these gods and goddesses were honored back when they were quote unquote part of these dead, parts of paganism.
Mm-hmm.
But those practices have still carried on, whether they were in writings, word of mouth, whatever. So the honoring of those practices is still there in modern day paganism. Now, the thing about me specifically is I'm Norse pagan, but I also practice Alexandrian tradcraft. But I lean more closely to the Norse gods and goddesses because that's where I feel my calling, and that's who I feel calls to me the most. So each individual person has their own each individual deity that they feel a connection to, and they honor that person in the way, or that god or that goddess in the way that is dictated through those practices that they should be honored. So do I feel like if a Viking were to come back now and feel like his religion has been blasphemed? No, I honestly don't, because like I said, that honoring of those traditions and stuff for whatever god or goddess you choose to follow, it's still there. Those traditions are still being followed and adhered to this day, no matter how old
I think
ranks are.
if a Viking would come to life in these modern times, the way things are going now, I don't think there'll be disappointment. I think there'll be more of a celebration and an achievement, knowing that they actually what they started is still honored to this day. So if anything, I think there'll be a sense of pride. If anything, he fuck around, bring a beer out for everybody to celebrate. That's just the way they roll.
I think their minds will be blown. They'll react as a person first. They'll be like, "Holy crap! What is all of this?"
Exactly. It went out of it went. Sorry.
They would walk around in awe and in amazement. I mean, if pagan, Viking, whatever you want to call it, you bring back Thomas Edison, he's going to walk around with his jaw on the floor, going, "Holy crap! What has happened here?" I think the response would be the same. I don't think, I mean, cultural appropriation, we're all a mix of a lot of different things. It's just these days, in this day and age, in 2022, there's a lot of mixture. I'm not any one thing. I don't think there's anybody here on the panel that is 100% any culture. We're all, especially here in the States, we're all a mix of several different things. So yes, we've appropriated from different cultures and aspects into our individual lives, but I don't think paganism in any sense of the word is any different than that.
Yeah, and the main culture appropriation that we're dealing with, that I am aware of, that a lot of Native Americans are dealing with, is a cultural appropriation of others trying to imitate them and failing at it miserably, and they're getting it from, I don't basically I want to call it a case of Hollywood gone bad.
Yeah, there is that. But that's Hollywood. That's not pagans.
No,
That's a big distinction I think
Yeah.
that we need to make
Mhm.
is that
right,
that is Hollywood. That is not pagans. Pagans
Right.
don't.
right.
And
No, we're not out there going, oh well, if you don't believe this, then I mean there are the few that are, but I don't think that's a pagan thing. That's a
No,
Hollywood
it's-
thing.
right.
in the pagan traditions, okay, the borrowing of pantheons and everything else, most of us pagans who are studied, and I mean immensely studied, we study the mythologies we follow. Okay, like I follow a lot of the Norse pantheon myself. I've read the entire poetic Edda. Okay, and studied it immensely. So therefore, if I'm going to appropriate, if you will, or their belief systems, I'm going to, of course, study their belief systems intensely. There are pagans out there who focus on the Eastern mysticism, like the Hindu and Vedic traditions, that have done immense lot of study in in Sanskrit. They do immense lot of study in the mantras and they do immense lot of study in tantric medicine. They do immense lot of study in the Vedas. They do immense amount of study in even so far as the chakras and mudras and yoga and all the other Eastern mysticism. And these are also pagan traditions. These are pagan traditionalists who will study Eastern mysticism. But the thing is, I think one of the things that makes pagans different than most people is if we appropriate things by educating ourselves about each individual belief system that we choose to emulate. Rather than appropriate, we emulate it. But we do it by studying
Hmm.
first.
Exactly.
We don't do it by taking bits and pieces of the culture and saying, well, I want to be this because I want to be a Viking. Because in Hollywood, Vikings are made to look at carry axes and wear horned helmets, which they never wore.
Nope.
Okay, you know that's the big difference.
Okay, so a couple other things. On the last program, there was a phrase, I think, Ed, you might have used it. You said modern paganism. Okay, so is there a difference between modern paganism and whatever we have the opposite, ancient paganism? And if there is, what is that difference?
Okay, ancient paganism was the paganism practiced at the time between the Roman Empire up until maybe around the 17th century, 18th century. Okay, that would be considered ancient paganism.
Mhm.
Modern paganism got its stem and beginning to the spiritualist movement in the 19th century all the way to current.
Well,
Okay,
what I'm gonna kind of go with Roderick here because I don't disagree with that, but I believe paganism started well before Roman times.
Oh, it did before
Oh
Rome.
yeah. It
So
was.
yeah.
ancient paganism would be anything prior to.
Prior to Roman times and before, I should have said. Thank you for the correction. Actually, it stemmed all the way back into the paleo era.
right before organized religion, more or less.
Right.
Okay,
Basically back in the Dark Ages.
Right.
Before the Dark Ages, even.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're talking Paleolithic man.
Right. Cavemen, if we're going to call it that. So,
I think we are closer to that now than we were in the 17th and the 18th centuries. We are more of an eclectic mix now than we were at that time because there were only a handful. There were the Norse, there were the my brain just went. You had a select few. You were one of 7 pantheons.
at least in Europe, yeah, you're talking about the Celts and things like that. So you're talking about
There were only 7
Vikings,
in Europe.
Druids.
prior to Roman times when everything kind of got compartmentalized. And if you do this, you're that, and if you do that, you're this, and so on and so forth. I think we are closer to that now than we were. We're closer to ancient, the way things were in ancient times, than they were over the last couple of centuries. couple of thousand years, actually.
I would tend to agree.
I don't think that there's a difference between ancient paganism and modern paganism, and I think to call what's happening now modern paganism would be mislabeling that, because paganism never disappeared.
Right.
So what you had in the 17th century and into the 18th century was you had the Spanish Inquisition, you had these witch hunts going on. So these people that practice paganism and practice, the path, or the old ways is another terminology. They went more underground, so things didn't get written down. Things were passed along by word of mouth. Things were kept inside families. So you saw more family practices happening. You didn't see covens meeting. You didn't see a general public meeting of these people unless it was done in secret at a prearranged place. And even when they did that in great fear of their life, because they were being hunted as devil worshippers, what have you, because of what they practiced.
So even that's not necessarily a Hollywood thing.
No, that's not a Hollywood thing. That is an actual
Yeah.
event that has happened, and it's in our past. The Spanish Inquisition did happen. The English Inquisition happened. The Salem witch trials is a very, very real thing.
Yep.
So let me put this a little bit more though. So I've been researching obviously as well. Otherwise, why should I be doing this? I should research as well, so I'm knowledgeable.
Right.
And I noticed that the Alexandrian, I think we call it, and then maybe I think it's called the Gandrian. I think I get it right.
Gardnerian.
Gardnerian.
Yeah, those two, which seems to be two major sects within modern paganism, we'll call it that for a moment, even if it's the wrong term, didn't start until the 1960s. So why is there this new revival, if we want to call it, in the 1960s? Was this just that general hippie spirituality that was going on in the 1960s, or what was going on here?
Possibly.
The revivalism actually occurred started off in the 1800s, actually.
Right.
With the spiritualist movement, we're talking 1868 all the way into the 1920s and 1930s, particularly. And you're talking at that point, you're talking Madame Blavatsky, you're talking Harry Houdini, you're talking all the other spiritualist movement aspects, Aleister Crowley. And Crowley practices and everything. These are all the spiritualist movement that was occurring in the up until the 1930s, 1940s. The 1960s, and having lived in the 60s,
I would have never known, Ed. You're so young looking.
Tell him.
No comment.
having lived
Shit.
the Aquarium Movement, okay. The Aquarium Movement basically was a movement of change of spirituality based upon the fact is that people were tired of the traditional Christianity. They were tired of traditionalism in general, and they were seeking something different. They were seeking spirituality over theology. Now, this stemmed all the way into the 1970s, 1980s, when people started actually writing books on the subject, more so than before. Okay, and this is where most of your books on the witchcraft started getting written, was in the 1980s, all the way into the current time now. This is why I call it modern paganism, though it's still paganism. Okay. Up until even now, books are being written constantly about pagan craft and tradition that have stemmed back from, like I said, and they go through the history, and part of the history, and our history, of the revitalization of paganism, if you will, was the fact that it began in the spiritualist movement and worked its way up through the Aquarian age and on now to current. And that's where we're at currently.
Okay, so you're saying that it's possible that the hippie, you call it the age of Aquarius, was really, at that time at least, was really closely associated with a lot of the hippie movement. So you're saying that kind of at some point they might have merged a little bit or overlapped, and if they did, was there a lot of drugs in the early version of not just marijuana, but like LSD and things like that in the early pagan movement of the 60s?
Look at my parents.
No. The difference between paganism and the hippie movement was simply the fact that the pagans actually still to this day frown upon being intoxicated while working magic.
Okay.
I don't think that was his question. I think the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong. The actual question was there a lot of drugs going on when the movement became what we know it as today? I think in part the answer to that question is yes. There was a lot of that happening in the environment at the time. Some of the traditions that are in some aspects of certain cultures of pagan, certain pagan cultures. Yes, that might have been a part of, but again, we're talking individual sects, not paganism as a whole. We do
Right.
have some pagans who will, do a peace pipe. That's Native American. It would be classified as a drug these days. We have other cultures. We have a culture that's coming out now that uses what's the word?
Hallucinogenics.
Yes, hallucinogenics. Yes,
That's what I was talking about.
You're talking
They
about peyote?
no, it's
Peyote and mescaline and also mushrooms.
That's more of a Native American thing, though.
Right.
Right?
And obviously, the North
there
didn't use
is
much.
a movement. There is a movement or a culture that's coming about now that uses what do they call it? Oh, I'm gonna have to Google. Starts with an A. It's a ritual where they bring everybody into a room and it's everybody goes into a transitive state and they do the LS. It's psilocybin.
Psilocybin mushrooms.
Psilocybin, yeah, that one.
Yeah. Which is what the Norse use that too, and they're part of their religion. So it's not
trancing,
new.
what they call trancing.
Right. Okay, that's a good one. I want to circle back to something Ed said. He was talking about the Eastern mysticism. Now, obviously, some of that still goes on. Like, for example, there might be pagans among your group here or in general that borrow some of the Eastern mysticism. However, there's actual still living, if we want to call it that, traditions like Hinduism and some of that had never changed through centuries. Now, when they come across pagans who are borrowing a little bit of that, maybe not all of it, just borrowing it, do they get offended by that? Have you ever experienced any of that, or they think it's okay?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I'll be a perfect example. I'm a solitary witch. I've been always on my own. I don't follow Wiccan. I don't follow pagan. Run my own path, make my own rules. That's the way I've been doing it. But as a solitary witch, we also learn how to adopt and adapt to basically everything that's around us. Now, if it's a pagan that we want to choose, we can go pagan. We can choose Wiccan if we wanted to. What I'm trying to say is everything has to do with the choice you want to make and how you want to correct your path and whatever it is that comes to go with it.
Very good.
Right. Tell you what, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to be right back after these words from Metaphysical Times and Sister Moon. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I just walked into this coffee shop. You'll never guess what I found. All the help is deeply engrossed in Metaphysical Times. You should too. I'm at the Egyptian, 475 Park Avenue in Idaho Falls, Idaho. You get your very own copy for free, and we're open till 10.
Sister Moon, Apothecary and More is a collaboration of local island witches bringing you handcrafted tools for ritual, amazing apothecary, custom vinyl work, merchandise, and so much more. But we are not just an online store. We are a sisterhood, a platform, and a voice for everything that is magical. Join us for our famous Tarot Tuesdays from 11 to 4 Eastern Standard Time for a discounted reading with our amazing in-house intuitive reader and priestess, Wolf Spirit Energy, Beverly Oberling. You can find us on Facebook at Sister Moon Store or on the web at sistermoon.shop. So fly on over and stop in for a spell.
And we are back, and we are joined by Roderick Edwards, who's our special guest tonight, along with our usual round table. And so basically, we're going to get right back into it. Also wanted to say good evening to Jessica, who's joining us. Appreciate you tuning in. And anybody else over there on Facebook who is tuning in, please be sure to join us.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we basically covered most of cultural appropriation. Unless anybody else has anything to say, I think Ed, he said, what's the word you used? We don't appropriate, we
Emulate.
emulate. So that's a better word. You're emulating it. Little bits and pieces of it. Oh, somebody's got some music going on.
Sorry.
Here we go. No worries. So, anything
sorry,
else?
I was going to say real fast, when it comes to cultural appropriation, pagans don't do that, but there are groups out there that will appropriate stuff from pagans and will take certain symbols and stuff and twist them for their own use. I'm pretty sure all of us are very aware of what's going on with the Asatru religion right now. It's being taken and shaped into something that it's not, which is a path of Norse paganism. The symbols that are used in Norse paganism are being taken and twisted to for hate and of certain races and stuff, which is something that myself and other pagans are very upset about, and it's very disturbing because when you take something that we hold close to us and you twist it and warp it into something that's, intolerance and hatred, then everybody starts to associate with that. A lot of time when I go out in public, I have to hide my Mjolnir because people see that as a sign of white supremacy and hatred towards other races and stuff. They don't understand that the actual symbolism behind it is something that's a lot deeper, that it has a deeper meaning to it.
Yeah, could you say that of the swastika originally, obviously, because we wouldn't get into that later, but
That
was originally not like that at all, but it's been
No, actually, he's right. The swastika has a way deeper meaning.
Yeah, the swastika is a Hindu good luck symbol that was twisted and warped by the Nazis. And
it'll never recover now. There's no way of recovering it.
No, it'll never be the same.
And that's the problem. And
it'll never be the same. I think if enough effort was put into recovering it, I think as big as the Norse community has become, a group taking that and twisting it will have an effect, but I don't think it will grow.
No.
As big as what happened with the swastika, because there are enough people in that Norse community now that will be like, no, that's not, no.
Right.
We're out here. We're we may have to hide it from certain people, but we aren't having to hide it from our government. We aren't having to hide it from the people that could really do some massive damage to us. And there are enough in the community now that I don't see that becoming as bad as the swastika became.
It's a small percentage.
I mean, it's all over TikTok. When this started happening, it hit social media, and there were multiple videos, multiple YouTube videos, multiple what have you, posts on Twitter, posts on Facebook from the Norse pagan community saying, this is not what we stand for. This is not what we represent. This is not what being an Asatru is about. So,
and I think with any one particular sect of paganism, you're going to the ones that hold true outnumber the ones who don't and who don't know by plenty.
Mm-hmm. Roderick, you were asking particularly about have I ever experienced, you asked me if I have ever experienced it with Eastern mysticism, example, borrowing from Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism.
Yeah, because that's still being practiced by people who've been practicing it for thousands of years.
I've actually talked to many a Buddhist, to many Taoists. I've even visited ashrams and stuff like that. And from the personal side of it, within the ashrams and everything else that I've been in, they actually appreciate the fact is that pagans are, practicing their religious beliefs to the best and understanding and associating themselves with their religious beliefs. So they're actually more appreciative than against, or they're not saying much about being like misappropriated. You know what I mean?
Right. So another question, more of a gentle question. So it has to be. So your intention is to honor and appreciate their religion. However, as human beings, we may have get some things wrong. Do you ever actually should have gentle correction from them? Hey, Ed, this is not quite how we think this or how we believe this. You might want to adjust your thinking here. As studies as you are, has that ever happened to you?
Not really.
Okay. We're just checking.
Honestly, say
Does that mean it doesn't happen? No, absolutely not. I mean, there are those among us who are, well, if you're not doing it this way, you're not doing it right.
Right.
It's become such a big and eclectic mix of people now that to do that would be just rude in general. We all practice our own ways, and my way may not be the same as Sierran's way. My way may not be the same as Ed's way or Earl's way or anybody else's way. It may not be that way, and we all understand and respect that, I think.
Most people do, yes. There are. I have run onto certain people who basically get all twisted with saying that there should only be one way of doing things. Is like, and I'm usually the one that corrects them on this, very gently, mind you. That look, there's not everybody practices the same way, and we all respect that, and that's you're going to run into that everywhere you go in the pagan community, that either you respect everybody's spiritual path, or we're not going to have anything to do with you, period.
Right. Not all two witches have the same path.
No,
Right.
absolutely not.
back in the 80s, okay, yes, it was commonplace for traditionalists and traditional craft covens, right, to have a little bit of infighting, okay, to where they believed that theirs were the only ways and the correct and proper way of practicing craft. It happened very frequently in the 80s. It happened also in the 70s and the 60s. Okay. With the rise of paganism as it is occurring now, though, right, there's been a change of that attitude and a change of that perception. I'm a traditionalist, Alexandrian Wiccan traditionalist, but I accept all craft practices as equal to my own practice.
Yep.
In fact, I incorporate a lot of other craft practices into my practice, and I even teach my students, regardless of whatever practice they personally have, right, that they're welcome to even have that practice. One of the things I even tell my students is one of the courses I have is you create your own rituals. Okay, my students not only create their own rituals, but they choose whatever pantheon they feel appropriate with, and they perform that ritual.
All right.
There's crossover. I'm just going to throw this in here. There's crossover among us as well. I mean, I haven't practiced with Sierra directly, but Ed and I have practiced together. We have performed magic and performed rituals on each other. I'm attending a new moon festival this evening. Not necessarily part of my specific practice, but openness to being a part of something that is a celebration of something that is near and dear to my heart.
All right.
There's a lot of crossover, and I mean it's basically, if you're throwing let's take a non-pagan approach to this. You're throwing a party. It can be to celebrate a cat walked across your yard for the first time in 3 years. All right, you're celebrating. Do you want a bunch of people from, only the people that think celebrating a cat walking across your yard for the first time? Or do you want anybody willing to come over and say, hey, congratulations, that's kind of a big deal?
That's a good way to describe
it. If you want the acceptance, the appreciation, and the co-celebration, you let in whatever comes. Otherwise, you're cutting off good things in several directions. I think that's what the pagan community now is becoming more and more. And that's something to celebrate.
Right.
Okay, so before we go on, because you've opened another, I get that. And that's wonderful. there has to be. You can't tell me it's not all love and kisses and sweets. There has to be groups of people, not just one individual, but groups of people like okay, these people have gone too far off the deep end for us. Is there any of that at all? I mean, let's say I'm
Oh yeah.
a group of people that not just practice nudity in their worship, but let's say what's the thing where multiple people? Damn, I can't think of the word. Or orgies, orgies and things like that. Just really off the wall stuff that you wouldn't. It's illegal in some places, but do you guys push back? Do you experience any of that? And what would you do if you did experience any of it?
I experienced an orgy when I was 24. And ain't nothing wrong with it. It's just a bunch of horny old people wanting to do some things. That's all it is.
That was just an example. There could be all kinds of other examples.
This is the way I look at it. Is to each their own. How you practice your craft is how you practice your craft. How I practice my craft is how I practice my craft. I had the fortune of being trained by Ed. I also had the honor of being trained in his coven and working through the degree system through the Alexandrian Tradcraft in his coven and becoming an elder in that coven.
Nice.
So, the craft that I practice isn't the same that Christy practices. It's not the same craft that Earl practices. It's not even the same craft that Ed practices because, like I said, I'm more Norse pagan than I am Alexandrian. So even though me and Ed might honor the same gods and goddesses, the way we go about doing that and the rituals that we do that with are more than likely, if not 100%, completely different.
That's a fact.
So just because you're brought up in the same tradition, if you decided to do traditional, paganism and do tradcraft, you're going to develop your own unique way that you go about practicing that craft that's going to be completely different from everybody else's. Every witch is different, whether they're part of a coven or not.
There is no one way.
Mm-mm.
Okay, there is absolutely no one way to the Creator. All ways are equal.
Are there people out there that will disagree with that? Yes, absolutely. There are people out there that will disagree that the sky is blue or that the grass is green.
Or the earth is flat.
Or the earth is flat. Are those people among us? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, hands down, without a doubt. That's a human trait.
Right.
Not a pagan or non-pagan trait. So, yeah.
I'm ready to move on to the next one because you guys opened the doors for me here. One, and give me a moment to set it up so we don't, oh my God, what's he saying? But what I've heard so far is, and what probably a listener of a non-pagan persuasion might be hearing is, these people are saying you just be an individual and make up whatever you want. That's what they might be hearing. I'm sure that's not what you're going to correct me here in a minute. However, I want to also tie that to morality. Now, we talked about the rule of three. Whatever you do to somebody comes back to you in three. Ed described it as it comes back to you spiritually, emotionally, and physically. But I want to get more into the morals. Are there some shared morals? For example, most religions or non-religions, everybody, even if you're in atheistic countries, they would say lying and cheating and killing is an immoral act. However, I want to talk about things like, and again, these are subjective to some degree, so I'm trying to tread lightly. But in some religions, whether it's Christianity or Islam or some other religion, homosexuality, transsexuality, abortion, even racism might be okay in some other religions if it means keeping to our own selves, our own people, blah, blah, our own kind, blah, blah. I want to understand, is there any kind of morality beyond lying and cheating and stealing that is common to most pagans? Is homosexuality?
You would have to ask each pagan individually how they would answer that question.
But why is the question? Why? Because it seems like now, again, we're getting back to the, we just make it up as we go. I can make it up as we go. Is there no solid foundation for morality within shared paganism? Go ahead, anybody take a shot at it.
Not that's spoken, not that's written down, not that's plainly laid out. No.
I will agree with Christy on that and say there is not one certain strict moral code within paganism. But there are moral values within humanity.
Right.
And that is the key point of pagans. We believe in what's called human moral value, or the value of humanity and the value of creation. Thus, if you are in well, I say it this way: we don't believe there's black or white magic. All magic is, for example, is a physical manifestation, manipulation of energy in accordance with one's will.
Right.
It has no moral value, and the same thing applies in human condition too. In human conditioning, you have to adapt your morals, as Sharon said about adaptation. You adapt your morals in accordance with the environment and morality of the place, city, country, state, township, district, even down to the neighborhood,
Down to your own personal mental state.
into your own personal space, into your own morality. Okay, that's the adaptation of morals. And the thing about it is, if you take it and look at it from this example, in the United States, it is not only immoral, but it's illegal to walk around naked. Right?
And plus, go ahead, continue. And I got something to add on to that.
In public. Okay. Now, if we went to Africa and there's a tribe in Africa says it's immoral and illegal to walk around wearing clothes, whose morality is correct and whose is wrong? Try neither or both. Okay. We cannot place our moral values upon others. And that's one of the key things in paganism that you will find in common paganism, is we do not place our own moral values upon others. Instead, we judge our own morals based upon our own actions and our own attitudes, and we adjust our morality in accordance with the conditions we live within, the societies we are part of.
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm a big believer in premises. A premise, if it's pushed, you can see whether it's true or not. So, example, what you just said, two things. One, you said human morality. For example, in Christianity and some other religions, humanity begins or the life begins at conception in a lot of religions. So therefore, you'd think that as pagans, they would say, hey, we want to protect humans, so they should not kill humans, so they should be anti-abortion. Secondly, if there was a group of pagans who, I don't say white pagans, Hispanic pagans, whatever, who said, we're going to keep to our own people, would that also be but yet Ed says, hey, no, you can't do that. You're being racist by keeping your own. You need to branch out. Would you do that, or would you say leave that alone? Hey, that if Syrian says, hey, I like to only be around Hispanics, which I know he doesn't, but if he said that, you're saying that he'd be justified in that, and who are you to say different to him? Is that what you're telling me?
Basically, yes.
Okay, I'm just making sure you're consistent with what your premise is, which is good.
It looks like this. Okay. What's good for Sierran is good for Sierran. It may not be good for me.
But you wouldn't say he's immoral. You wouldn't say he's immoral.
Exactly.
No, it's not immoral. What might happen is
we are technically racist. What a lot of people consider racist.
No.
Okay.
What might happen if there was something that somebody was doing in their practice that was, visible to a large group of people, and there were people in the group that didn't agree with that particular practice. They would be like, oh, okay, well, cool. That's what they're doing. I'm going to go over here.
More power to you. Exactly.
And they will be more power to you. Enjoy your day. Blessings, whatever.
So some forms of racism, if it existed, which I don't think it does, but if it did exist, would be okay. Is that what you're saying? Like, let's say there was a group that said, we're Norse, and therefore I was watching the sequel to Vikings. It's called Valhalla, and they have and obviously this is Hollywood, but they have a black lady in charge of Kattegat, which is not likely. It could have happened, but it's not likely. So what if I was a purist and I said, no, we only have the Norse people only have white male or white people, blah, 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 and I was trying to be a purist. Could you call that person a racist, or would you say, well, that's how they see it,
well,
and therefore there's no moral issue?
You could, but you also have to. But you also have to look at the history of how the Norse converted people over into their religion also, because there were people that they took as quote unquote slaves that were from different, races.
Right, but not as the queen of Connecticut.
And they were embraced into the Norse path. They were adopted as family members into Norse families, children that were adopted in because for whatever reason, and they became leaders inside the Viking community. So is it possible that a Black woman could have been running Catacat because she was embraced by a Norse family and raised in North paganism because she was kidnapped at however old. Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. I'm not just
Okay, one of the key things before I let Earl speak, because I mean Earl's been trying to say something too.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I always keep in mind is this thing called judgment. Whenever you point a finger at somebody, how many you got pointed back at you?
You got double the amount.
You got 3 times the amount, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, and the thing about it is, in the pagan community, in the general pagan consensus and the general pagan populace, we are not judgmental people. We do not point fingers. We tend to disagree with those who do, actually. Those who have tendency to censor or point fingers or anything else, we don't associate with it. They're to each their own. But the general consensus is, judge not lest ye be judged also, which also is a Christian tradition, I believe.
Yep.
He was without first sin, first cast law.
I think the reference you're looking for, Ed, is judge not, for you shall be judged in the measure that you judge.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, like I said, I just paraphrased it to judge not lest ye be judged also.
As much as we can say all this, people are going to judge anyway.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
People are people. Yeah.
Well, I think the uniqueness of paganism is that that pagans understand people are people and deal accordingly.
Right. Earl, you wanted to say something? Oh, sorry, Earl.
Yeah, well, basically going back to what I would call people who want to basically have their own little circle, not have anything to do with anybody else. That's what you call a clique. And that's the way people are going to look at it. It's not defined as racism. It's basically defined as a close-knit circle that doesn't want anything to do with anybody else. That's perfectly fine. They can do what they want. So go ahead, no problem. But that's what it's referred to as a clique.
I think enlightenment plays a huge role in that. The more spiritual you are, the more you become accustomed to, and you realize that the things that hang you up go away. You're not hung up by a clique that wants to do things their way. People, you can't control other people's behaviors. When you realize that, what's left? I do what I want to do. I do it the way I want to do it, and I don't worry about what other people are doing, thinking, saying, smelling, or anything like that.
So realize again that the listener and obviously the board here, which I think you realize this, but realize that I'm not talking about people judging pagans from the outside. I'm talking about pagans judging other pagans or understanding other pagans or things that pagans do. So I'm within your own body. Mm-hmm. How do pagans interact? Yeah, but there has to be some point of morality. We've been talking all about I do my own thing. I do my own thing. Is there any kind of certain morals that we can get to? Again, lying, cheating, killing. I think we all, whether you're just as human, would say those things are wrong. But what if we had a pagan group, and maybe there is such one, that said, life is so precious that if you abort anybody, then you're killing life and you're betraying humanity. And they're really adamant about that. I don't know if there's even such a thing like that within your group.
We live by a rule: harm none, don't hurt nobody either.
Right. I get
and
that.
despite all that, it's going to happen to us regardless, and it's going to happen to someone. It may happen to one of us today or tomorrow. That's a choice.
Yep.
I don't think that's an obligation.
And as far as morally going, we don't, we have both sides of the coin. Some pagans believe believe choice should be the ultimate rule. Some believe that life should be the ultimate rule. What I believe does not have to be what everybody in the round table believes. What they believe doesn't have to be everything I believe. There's no...
But I'm pushing it further because the reason why it's different is because in various other religions, individuals may have a belief, like a lot of Catholic churches, for example, an individual Catholic might say, I'm okay with choice. But the Catholic doctrine says, no, based on the scriptures of this, this, and this, abortion is wrong. So what I'm looking for here from you guys is there any cohesive morality beyond lying and cheating and stealing, killing, that is different among pagans than it might be from non-pagans?
We're not religion. Paganism is not any particular religion.
Well, you have some shared beliefs, right? No, yes.
Paganism is okay.
It is a shared belief, yes, but paganism itself is
a spirituality.
Right, spirituality. It is not an actual religion.
Right, but there has to be some cohesiveness, even as spirituality.
There's no. That's the beauty of it. That is the beauty.
There doesn't have to be anything. That's the point.
It really doesn't.
That's the beauty of it, Roderick. That spirituality does not have a law or a rule or a system of order that says you must be this or you must be that way. Spirituality is an absolute faith and belief in the creation and divine creative force, and an absolute commitment to that creation, period. And recognizing that you are just a small portion of the larger creation, but you're also a co-creator within that portion. That's what spirituality says. Religion is the thing that drives people, because religion is controlled by man. Religion is what makes people turn towards having a set of obedience and rules and guidelines. You must do this and you must do that because this is what the Bible says, or this is what.
Exactly.
And that was set forth by the church.
And that's set forth by churches. That's set forth by man in controlling man and governing man and setting moral standards. Spirituality stems beyond that. Spirituality stems beyond the whole awareness of self, the whole awareness of universal law, the whole awareness of universal truth, and the whole awareness of the creative force.
Okay, so moving back to universal law, then universal law would say lying and cheating and stealing is killing is wrong, right? Is that right?
How do we know that? We don't know.
I'm not asking you. I'm asking you. I'm being neutral.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is none of us know what universal law states because it's universal law.
Okay, so lying and cheating and killing might be okay.
That's up to the individual person.
In some cultures, maybe, but when it comes to us pagans, it goes back to human morality.
You have people that live stringently by the don't kill, don't lie, don't cheat, don't do these things. All right. If you take them literally, you would be going to some bad place, that there would be some very bad consequences that happen to you.
Some amount of justice.
If you killed a bug, thou shalt not kill.
Well, thou shalt not murder.
Everything. That's the pagan belief. It doesn't just apply to this person or this sect or that sect. It applies universally. We don't kill a bug. We don't lie. Your kid comes up and goes, "Hey, mommy, what's a hooker?"
You have to tell them the truth.
And a 4-year-old, you're going to tell them the truth, or are you going to be like, "Oh, well, it's this, that, or the other thing." There is no individual rule or no solidarity rule over that. What I tell my kid in that situation is going to be completely different from what somebody else told me.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last question here. We got about 6 minutes.
Well, we're still only have 2 questions, so I'm going to push. I'm going to push a little harder there. So we had the universal law, and we had Shadow Wolf telling us we don't know universal law. Then we had Christy saying, which is fine. I'm just trying to compare this. We had Christy saying that we all kind of to our own conclusions of, because no matter what you are, pagan or not pagan, these things happen, and we all lie because it's just matter. We all kill because even if we don't mean to.
That's just human nature.
However, I'm still looking for some kind of cohesive, even within your spirituality. Maybe I sidetracked this by using the word religion. Even within our own spirituality, there has to be something we can look at and go, as pagans, like I think when we started the show, somebody trying to imply that racism was wrong, which I think it is personally, and possibly based on my beliefs that I not need to share here because we're not talking about my beliefs, but within paganism, racism even can't be wrong. from what I can understand, because if you're a pagan and you're a group of pagans that believe, hey, white superiority or Hispanic, like I know a lot of black people who believe that blacks were the very first people here and the ancients and blah, 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 and they should be esteemed as higher in authority over human race than all people. I actually know black.
We were dark.
So anyhow, my point is that where is this morality we're looking for? Is there any morality? It seems like what we're getting to the closing that technically morality is whatever you want it to be.
I guess more of the question should be, what do we set as our morality? Do we, you brought up lying, cheating, lying, cheating, stealing, murder, stuff like that. Are these things that we call morality because this is stuff that we're taught by people that said, hey, these are the morals that you have to live by? Who set these down as this is how you should live your life? And I guess that's where the real question comes in is, do we go by or is our moral compass set by what society says is these are what your morals should be, or who is the person to dictate what somebody's morals should be?
That's a hard one to answer because through generational life and through this whole planet, generational families have always give their children, do not do this because it's wrong, do this because it's right. No religion can tell you that. Nobody in this planet can tell you that. This is something we grew up with. It doesn't have to do nothing with religion. In fact, fuck religion. It had nothing to do with it. These are things we were raised with because we knew better because our parents were raised the same way.
If we can boil down to it, it's probably more of a society thing because if you do those things, we talked about lying, cheating, your reputation will be destroyed. You possibly could be caged or killed. I mean, it might have nothing to do with morality at all. It's just the consequences. If you do these things, here's what's going to happen to you.
Exactly what I was about to point out. Okay. Again, when I say human morality, I'm referring to the cultural, tribal, societal rules, laws, and advances that you must follow in order to adapt and be part of a community. Okay? Pure, plain, and simple. These rules have been set down and set in motion since the dawn of mankind.
To keep societies functioning. Otherwise, they wouldn't function. They'd collapse.
Exactly. These are societies together. That's what builds societies. It's what creates society. Okay? These are the moral codes which all humans should, by general principle, live by.
Common sense is not so common.
The consequences.
And commonly do live by. If we didn't, we would not be a race. We would not be a survival of any race called humanity at all.
Right.
So therefore, if you're looking for one solitary rule or one solitary set down of human thing, human morality is the answer.
Whatever you have to do to survive, it may be different from one household to the next, from one person to the next. Do what you need to do to survive without.
Well,
do what you need to do to survive. If that means that you have to only practice it behind closed doors, that's what you do.
So be it. Okay, now we've got one comment.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we got one comment here from David Larson. He said he personally agrees with what he calls the 11 commandments, the base 10 plus the golden rule.
Do unto others as you have them do unto you. Or stick it to them before they stick it to you if you want to do the negative.
I mean,
very good.
I mean, everybody has their own moral compass.
Well,
that's
except for the human. Except for we've boiled down. I think we've boiled down. As we're getting ready to wrap up here, we have boiled down to there's certain things we thought of as morals. They really are just societal to keep the society functioning. And whether you're in Africa or whether you're in America, whether you're in Native America, wherever you are, if you steal from somebody, eventually you'll be untrustworthy and people won't trust you. If you lie to people, eventually they won't trust your word and they won't trust. If you murder people, they won't trust you. So it's all about if you take something from somebody else, they eventually won't trust you, and possibly either they'll put you in a cage or they'll kill you, one or the other. So it may not have anything to do with morals, more so that it has to do with consequences.
Respect.
Yes.
Right. Respect.
Exactly.
Yes,
Well,
indeed.
ladies and gentlemen, we now have 10 seconds before closing. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. I'd like to thank our our guest panel member, Roderick. Thank you for another interesting.
Thank you, Brother Roderick.
And Christy, I'll thank you for being here on behalf of Metaphysical Times and yourself. I'd like to thank Metaphysical Times for sponsoring our show this evening. I also like to thank Sharon for being here too. Sharon, thank you for being here. It's good to have
Thank you. It's an honor.
And thank you, Andrew, for being here and sharing your comments with us this evening. Earl, thank you for
Anytime.
co-hosting this show with us and also sponsoring this show with me. And on behalf of everybody, I'd like to say goodbye, farewell, Merry part, and blessed be to everybody. And take care of yourselves and take care of each other.
Good night, everybody.
Peace.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, y'all.
And as
Bye.
always, pleasant journeys. Have a good night.